Well, welcome, Lauren Beck. Dr. Lauren Beck is my guest today on The Organized Academic. Lauren is a Canada Research Chair. So for people in Canada, they know that that is the highest honor you can have as an academic position within the country. And if you're not from Canada, now you know. Lauren is a professor, full professor at Mount Allison University, where I teach. And Lauren gets a lot of things done. She's edited and written a number of books, many articles on Hispanic studies, on colonialism and Indigenous issues. And your current book that you're working on is about what, Lauren?
Canada's place names and how to change them.
Great. So I picked Lauren for this series because she's one of our high flyers. As you can see, she's incredibly young, and yet she is full professor with all of these accolades and an endowed chairship. And so I just wanted to talk to her today about how she gets it all done, how she organizes her work, how she remains productive, tricks and tips for anybody who wants the same kind of success that you have, Lauren.
Well, thanks for having me, Elizabeth, and I love your what you're doing with your blog and mentorship opportunities that you have. So I thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
So in terms of being productive, my dissertation supervisor taught me something very important early on. And that is, he told me I don't necessarily have to be the most intelligent person, and to not worry as much about that, because let's face it, you can't really change how intelligent you are, but rather it was about the amount of work I put into something that would make me successful or that would make a difference. And I really took that to heart by, well, working hard, I guess, but making sure also that I was exhaustive in my research, and in exploring a topic, which I think most of us are, but sometimes we get discouraged by blips that come up. And I try not to, just like not being the most intelligent person in the room, I try not to let those moments of discouraging moments derail what I was trying to do, whether that was for my thesis or for an article or for a class. So you identify your objectives, whatever they are, and you figure out a way to get there. You make a roadmap and you figure out a way to get there, and not worry as much about your own sort of endowments that you can't change. And I think a lot of us really do get distracted by some of those components, or feel maybe a bit insecure that we're not the most advanced or best equipped to deal with a certain topic. I mean, how often do you hear those anxieties expressed among colleagues who are afraid to maybe teach certain topics that, they haven't studied for years and years and years. And so I try not to let those limitations be something that prevents me from taking on exciting projects or collaborations.
So mindset is really important to you.
I think so. I mean, I think many people who know me probably know I'm sort of quite positive in my outlook, and that can kind of drive some people crazy maybe. But at the same time, I find that looking for opportunities, for possibilities is quite hopeful. And that sort of positive energy keeps you wanting to go forward. Whereas if you're looking at collaborations as being work or as, a bit of a downer, well, it's hard to want to be involved and contribute as much as maybe you would otherwise. So I find trying to find the positive side of any project that I'm working on can be quite motivating. Also makes you feel like what you're doing matters, and or somebody else cares about it. As academics, we often do stuff that nobody reads except for specialists in our field. But then other times, some of the things we do actually have broader impact, particularly when we're able to bring them into the classroom or to a general public or something along those lines.
Absolutely. So how do you work? Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? Do you work in time blocks? Like what is a day like for Lauren Beck?
Well, so before I got tenure, I made the mistake of getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, most days, not on the weekend. I'd get up early though still, and I'd go to my computer and I would work until I had to shower and go onto campus to teach or something along those lines. And then I would keep working. And so I began to realize it's not nice. Like I was passing out at 10 o'clock at night. My husband, and I weren't spending as much good quality time together as we could have been. So about 3-4 years ago, I started waking up at 8 o'clock. Like I don't take early morning meetings unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah.
Um, because just my rhythm is such that going to bed around 12, waking up around 8, making sure I get the 8 hours is really, really important. And the first thing I do is I'll make a cup of tea, and then I'll go catch up really quickly on the emails that come in overnight. And there's always a bunch of them.
It's always a bunch
Um,
of them. Yeah.
Always a bunch of them. I ignore the ones that I don't want to reply to. But then I often start writing. So I find that my best time of the day to write or to start writing is in the morning. And actually, I can write all day and 6,000 words a day. But the trick to doing
That's
that,
quite impressive, Lauren. That's a
well,
lot of words.
I didn't say they're all good words.
But they're words, yeah. Well,
They're
that's the
words.
hardest part, though, is getting started, right? It's just getting the words out.
It can be, and some days are good writing days, and some days I know they're not. It's not a good writing day, but I push on because if I have a goal, a certain pace for a project that I'd like to, a benchmark that I want to hit, then I need to keep writing. But at the same time, the way I write is a bit, I don't know if it's different, but well, when I do research, and if you're reading a book and maybe you take notes, like I do in a Word document, I often pause and do what I call pre-writing. So I begin to write as I'm researching. And then when I'm done, or at a moment where I'm pausing the research component and want to start writing and putting together an article or a book chapter, then I have these pieces that I can then go back, and they're like starting points for what quickly becomes a much more expansive narrative or exploration. And I find that really, really works well, and it keeps my writing linked closely to whatever sources that I'm using. But it also gets me between writing, reading, thinking, and sort of those constellations and moving about, so that I don't feel burned out by the end of the day. In fact, I often feel quite energized as a result of these different modes of engagement when it comes to whatever the project is.
That's really interesting. I know that a lot of us get sort of stuck in research mode, just read another book, just read another article, and we don't feel we can start until we're ready to start. And I remember talking to a colleague a number of years ago about this very subject, and she said, I start at the beginning and I just keep going back to the beginning and massaging and going in order. And my husband, who's also an academic, does what you do, Lauren, which is just writing different pieces all over the place and then putting them together. So it's interesting to hear you be able to put together that many words in a day and not be exhausted by mixing the modalities, as you say. That's really fascinating.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons I'm so productive, is because like I didn't actually just sit down and write 6,000 words. I wrote some of those words maybe another day. But while I was taking all those research notes, I also wrote quite a bit. And it ends up becoming a body of work that develops at some point coherence. I wake up one morning and I think, all right, I've done enough research. There's still more books to read, more interlibrary loans that will arrive. But to get to understand what's missing from my research, maybe I need to start knitting it together in order to see what linkages need to be better explored in terms of research. I find that really works well, but also then I can talk to colleagues who are knowledgeable about a project and maybe get their feedback or show them an earlier draft or discuss an outline and just get additional ideas, like you do often at a conference when you go and
Right.
present
Yeah.
material.
Great. So how many hours do you work a day? Like, I know you're a hard worker. Do you think it takes 8 hours a day to do this kind of work, or do you do less or more, or?
That's a good question. I mean, I definitely used to work about 70 hours a week, and
Wow.
it was a lot. And when I was department head, I wanted to keep up that productivity, but doing all the crazy things you have to do when you're in administration as well. So I made a decision I began to realize that as you're in the profession, the longer you are, the more efficient you become. So I began to play with that a bit and tried to maintain a certain number of hours of work relative to output, but not fill in additional time with even more tasks.
Hmm.
But I think what's really important, at least for me, is to make sure that my workday is structured with flexibility in it. So I like to run. Often in the late morning, I'll take an hour or two and go do that several times a day, or sorry, several times a week. And running is a really great way to like solve a problem, or if you're sort of at an impasse in a chapter that you're working on, you can think about it, or you can think about nothing related to the research, but get that break. And then after, next thing you know, you shower or eat lunch or something like that, and it's early afternoon, and you feel refreshed because you've just taken a couple hours away from what you were doing, and then you get right back into it. And
Mm-hmm.
here, my husband and I, we'd like to eat dinners together. So I don't typically work past 6 o'clock in the evenings. But with this flexibility, maybe I go to the supermarket, one morning
Yeah.
instead of running, or something along those lines, so that I don't have to go on the weekend and feel like I'm compressing personal time in any way. So this means I work pretty much 7 days a week, but I work when I want and how I want, which is really great flexibility to have, I think, in any job, because it allows you to maximize productivity, but also to take advantage of going to the beach on a quiet day during the weekday in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Or avoiding a busy, crowded, market on Saturday mornings when you can go another time of the week, which I think is a blessing in our profession. We have that
Yeah. That
inherently
flexibility.
built in. Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you learned over the years? What things would you want to teach somebody who's coming along, who's maybe working that 70 hours and trying to get tenure, trying to get a promotion? Like, do you have some words of wisdom around the process?
Well, it seems to me, having spoken with myself, going through to get tenure, and the nerves you feel, the anxiety you feel that you won't be good enough or that your colleagues won't support you, and then seeing others go through the same motions. I'd like to tell, my untenured assistant professor self to chill and not be too worried about it. But I don't think me or anybody else really heeds that warning. So if you're going to be productive, you might as well go for it. Try and get a grant, try and publish your first book if that's relevant in your field, or articles, whatever it is, and to become a great teacher as much as you can, and to work on those 2 or 3 areas that you are required to be to show excellence in order to get tenure. And make sure you're consistent. Identify what your weak areas are. For me, I don't know what my weak area was per se, but on paper, when I looked at my CV, I thought, well, I clearly look like I do research. I clearly look like I have grants. I clearly look like I've done a lot of administrative service. But on paper, I didn't have a lot of teaching-related accomplishments other than teaching evaluations and whatnot. So when I began thinking about that, I thought, well, how can I marry teaching better into research, like something I'm doing well? And that became one strategy through which I would manage to address my insecurity about going for tenure. So identifying what areas I thought I could improve or better articulate on paper for a tenure and promotions committee, and to simply address it rather than let whatever anxiety that is go unaddressed. Like, if you think there might be a problem flagged later on, why not try and do something about it sooner rather than later?
Are you a perfectionist?
Yes and no. So I don't really
Okay.
believe in perfection. But that being said, if I'm an editor of a book or of a journal, I'm a perfectionist in that sense. I can't stand to have footnotes and style, not follow whatever the style guide is for for the project. That drives me bonkers. But at the same time, I know that in my work, I won't catch all the mistakes. I won't catch all the errors. I'll always make a mistake. So I hope somebody else catches it. But if not, ultimately we all make mistakes. I just try and make sure it's not in my bibliographic references, because that's annoying, isn't it? You're reading something, you're really fascinated by whatever somebody just wrote. They give you a couple sources to go check out with page numbers, and you get there and it doesn't connect to what they were just talking about. There's a mistake in there somehow. So I try and make sure that the breadcrumbs in my research anyways are useful for other people to follow. So I guess in that way, a perfectionist. But no, my desk around here is pretty imperfect. There's dust on the places where I moved a book a little
Yeah,
while ago. You know what I mean? It's chaos in some sense here.
right. But you seem to be able to be, it may be like a lot of people find clutter distracting, but it seems like you can work amidst different situations.
Yes, I can. I can work in the middle of, in the middle of a crowded room and just block everybody out, which has its good sides and its bad sides. Because if my husband comes in and wants to talk about dinner, I might not hear him if I'm writing.
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention. So yeah, but definitely, you have to be adaptable if you can. I know it's not for everybody, or their home work environment or office work environment might not be as conducive to that flexibility, especially if you share office space or you don't have a dedicated, space of your own
Mm-hmm.
at home or on campus.
Are you a good teacher? What do you feel goes into good teaching? That was one thing you said you didn't have a lot of sort of formal recognition of in your CV, but what does that mean to you?
Well, when I first began teaching, it was in the language classroom. So teaching language is, for me, a bit of a different approach because you're teaching correct or incorrect. You're teaching, it's sort of a different skill set that you're teaching, whereas in visual and material culture studies, I'm imparting worldviews and cultural sensitivities and ways of knowing. So it's a wee bit different. For me, getting the students to become engaged in their own learning and responsible for it is really important to me. I find that students seem to learn in my classroom anyways the best and be the most to be able to demonstrate a productive or useful use for whatever we're learning about, to be gratifying to see a student take something that we've learned and then go apply it, whether it's an analysis or through an applied project. And then to see them look back at what they've learned and done and find gratification in it. That's fantastic. That's like, and you can find that in the language classroom as well, when a student is really interested in getting everything as correct as possible. But also, as I said, you can't expect perfection in anything. So to see how students navigate making mistakes and to help support them in doing so is preparing them for life, I think, right? Because if we expect perfection of our students and of ourselves, we're going to be waiting around quite a long time, I think, in my opinion, anyways.
Right. Well, Lauren, it's been great talking to you today. Thanks for your insights. It's fascinating to hear about how you work and how productive you've been. And I'm sure that this will be inspiring to anybody who watches it. So thanks again for being my guest today, Lauren Beck.